After a 4-2 week against two pretty good teams in the Dodgers and the Twins, it seems like this team finally might be making some progress.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Make sure you check out Locked On Sports today, talking all about the Stanley Cup Finals, baseball, and the NBA Finals. And if you want to win some money, and you would have won some money if you bet on the Pirates this week, make sure you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn for all of your betting needs. It's Monday, so of course Gary's here. My name is Ethan Smith. And it was a fun week of Pirates baseball this week, Gary. I don't think anybody would really argue too much about that claim. Some good wins against the LA Dodgers and the Minnesota Twins. Kind of talked about the Twins on Friday before this series began, that their record was kind of a little bit of a smokescreen, seeing as they have played the White Sox a good bit of times and the Angels a good bit of times. Still a good team, though. They're still a very solid team over there. I think they'll be right in the thick of the AL Central through the entire year. We know what the Dodgers are. They're going to be a good team as well. Pirates win 2 out of 3 against both of them. And how did you feel about the week overall, Gary, before we really get into some of the nitty-gritty on today's show?
I mean, overall, pretty positive week. The pitching staff makes it possible, man. Just about every game, it's possible. And Jones struggled a little bit on Sunday. I think it kind of got picked up by the bullpen game. That's a win you don't expect to get. You get it. So I don't know. I'd like to see them convert one of these sweep chances. That seems to be the next hurdle that has to come. If you really want to go on a winning streak, you obviously have to sweep some people. Mm-hmm. And it often feels like the Pirates throw everything they have in their bag of tricks at winning a couple games, and then they leave themselves with nothing left for that third game. If you really want that sweep, I don't know, don't you start Ke'Bryan Hayes? Don't you? I don't know. There just seems to be some things they could have done. Don't you make a roster move or something to freshen up the bullpen a little bit that you just spent?
Yeah.
Don't you do something like that? I would think you do. And maybe they just don't have any answers. That's there too.
Yeah, and there's an argument that can be had from some avenues that would say that the Pirates could have probably had an undefeated week if it were not for one reliever in both of those series finales. But you don't know what's really going to happen in those games outside of those innings that he had. Now, obviously, Sunday's game is a little bit more of, but Derek Shelton was in a little bit of a pickle there because that was his only available pitcher that he had at that point. That goes back to the point you made of saying, why don't you bring back up, for example, a Jose Hernandez who threw a pretty good game for Indianapolis while that game was going on yesterday and could have been available for you. But we're not going to talk about stuff that they didn't do. Let's talk about the things that they did. And you brought up that bullpen game on Saturday. Me and you were both there. You sat in center field, and even before the game told me I might be catching a couple balls today because of this with Woods Richardson versus a bullpen game. And they stole that game. I mean, they really did. I mean, Majinski pitched very well. I thought Ortiz did very, very good in his spot. I thought all the pitching was just really good. And right as I was leaving the stadium and driving home, I already kind of had the idea of what we were going to talk about today, no matter what happened in the game on Sunday, is that it almost feels like this bullpen, which we all praised, mind you, before the season started as a top unit potentially in baseball, albeit it's lost a lot of those pieces we talked about. It almost feels like, Gary, that as this bullpen continues to get better, we've seen Bednar, Holderman, and Chapman kind of finally become that trio of pitchers that we expected in late in games. If that middle relief can just, figure something out, be it outside the organization, inside the organization, anything, I just think that raises the potential of where this team can go. And arguably, I mean, if you're going to want to have to find anything to improve on, as far as it's concerned, as outside acquisitions, middle relief is usually the easier one to find all across baseball. So that's kind of what my takeaway has been from this is you saw 3 shutouts this week. 3. And you saw the bullpen do really well in a lot of these games against not so terrible lineups either. I mean, some pretty good hitters on all of these teams. If they can just raise their game, I just think that raises the potential of the team as well.
Yeah, I think one thing you really start to see is they're critically thin. They are starting to get a little bit better, like with Bednar, Chapman, and Holderman. I think that 7, 8, 9 has kind of taken shape over the course of the past couple weeks. And I still see him as a popular, like, get rid of this guy mention, but Hunter Stratton's been very good.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Like, Hunter Stratton is not a DFA guy. He's not a guy that you should be talking about like you want to shoot him into the sun. I don't know what you need to do. The ERA is bad. Everything else is really good. Really good. Yeah, he's a guy that I count on. Carmen Mlodzinski, I think, has shown a lot of progress here in the last couple weeks. He looks a lot better than he did. Control still his biggest issue. I think that's going to remain his biggest issue. But I could see him kind of developing into that middle guy. This Brule guy they just got, who knows? He's done all right.
Yeah.
He had a couple outings. He did good. But I think what you see is like when they're winning, like they did 4 of 6 here, they use that back end of the bullpen a lot. Like Bednar had gone 4 or 5 times. Holderman had gone 4 or 5 times. Mlodzinski had even gone 3 or 4. They're using the crap out of that bullpen. You talk about acquiring middle relief. I think good teams acquire more back end guys and shove some of them into the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the target is still going to be more back end guys. But yeah, anything they can find right now is welcome.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because we praise the starting pitching a lot. We do, and we should. I mean, it's Paul, Skenes, Jones, Keller, Falter. They've all done great. They all kind of have a similarity, though, much like a lot of starting pitchers that we see. When you have these high strikeout guys, Falter not being a high strikeout guy, it tends to mean they're not going to go super deep into games. And with a guy like Jared Jones, I even said it right after the first inning, that was not good for them at all that he had to pitch 25 or 26 pitches in that first inning, because yesterday was a game where they needed Jared Jones to go 7 innings. He goes longer.
I saw some takes that like people were upset he got pulled out of that game. He was going like 93, 94 on his 4-seam fastball.
Yep.
You see Jared Jones doing that, you pull him out of the baseball game.
Yep.
You don't try to get cute and see if you can get another inning out of him.
No.
Like, I don't know, man. Like, there's a lot to hammer Derek Shelton for. Let's at least use the things that he's actually done. Let's not make crap up. Look at the situations that are actually playing out for the team.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, you look at Jones yesterday too, on top of everything, and he came back. He had a very good outing for what it was worth after that first inning. But I did hear the broadcast mention too, he hadn't had a start on 4 days rest in quite some time as well. This was the first time in a good bit that he had a start on 4 days rest, keeping in mind too that he threw the most pitches he's ever thrown in his professional career against the Dodgers in his last start, which was a great start as well. So again, it would have been nice to see him go deeper, because you could make the argument that if he doesn't have as many pitches in the first inning and goes one more inning, Ben Heller never sees the field. Like, you don't even have to worry about that. And it's a lot of convoluted things, but the pitching, specifically the bullpen, I do think it's okay to say that if this bullpen continues to progress, so will the team. Now, there obviously are other aspects of this that are going to come into play, like the offense and all kinds of other things, and the starting pitching, even how long does it stay healthy? How long does it stay playing at this top level? We even saw Bailey Falter kind of get beat up a little bit. How long can he continue to be a good fourth option in this rotation? There's a lot of questions that you still ask, but I agree with you, though. I think that this pitching staff especially is going to keep them in it for a while. We'll talk about that later in the show, but it's been about a month now since Paul Skenes debuted. We were there for that as well. So what has changed with this team since he came up? What's been good? What hasn't? And let's analyze the team 1 month into Paul Skenes' career in just a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by Supply House. Shop Supply House for all of your plumbing, HVAC, and electrical product needs at supplyhouse.com, because you can get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. It's the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online, and their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. If you need help with an order, you can get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. All you have to do, folks, is go there, because over 100,000 pros already trust the Trade Master program to deliver results, and you can apply for a membership with the Trade Master program today and get a competitive edge on every order at supplyhouse.com. Save money and time when you order online and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. As mentioned, today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Summertime means baseball. We are about to enter, as they would say, the dog days of summer, and that means that you need to go to FanDuel and go make some money on the Pittsburgh Pirates, especially with Paul Skenes pitching tomorrow against a team that I think he's going to have a lot of success against in the St. Louis Cardinals. You also got the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup Finals, and you can bet all of it on FanDuel, because you guys have heard that $150 thing. Well, right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list, because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook and an official sponsor, the Locked On Podcast Network. And as you probably heard me mention earlier, the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup Finals, college baseball, MLB baseball, all of it is going on right now. So go check out Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 streaming channel of Locked On YouTube and Amazon Fire TV, where you can see all the local hosts of Locked On bring you all of your sports news every single day. One of the biggest things that came out in sports in the month of May was Paul Skenes debuting for the Pittsburgh Pirates in probably the craziest baseball game I've ever attended in my life that day. I was one of the brave souls that stayed after the rain delay. And yeah, that game kickstarted Paul Skenes' career. And ever since he debuted, you could almost feel a sense that he was the kind of player, and we kind of knew this already, but he's the kind of player that usually will give a franchise a bit of a bump forward. I'll say, I don't want to say urgency, which it can give emergency, but I'll say a bump forward. Since they have a winning record, since he debuted, Nick Gonzalez has been a big part of that too. The offense has kind of gotten out of that funk they were in late April, early May. And the bullpen, much like, in the middle of May, was not great. And as I told everybody, like the offense, Gary, the bullpen would eventually come back and be a stable unit. Now, the back end has been a stable unit. The middle relief, not so much. But Paul Skenes will pitch tomorrow. We'll obviously talk about that on this show tomorrow with JD Haffron of Locked On Cardinals. But What is the feeling now, 1 month in with Skenes here, Gary, that you think about this team and where it could be versus where it's going? Because those are two different things, folks. Where it could be is kind of like expectations of what you would like. Where it's going, I think, is a more realistic, broader look at what we're seeing, especially adding a guy like Paul Skenes to your rotation.
I mean, there's a couple of different timelines that you're forced to look at, right? Like, I look at this rotation and I'm obviously excited about what it can produce this year. But I look at this rotation and I see that every member of it that's been productive is locked up for the next 5-6 years, on this team. And that's minimum. They could do something if they wanted to. There's more coming. I mean, Braxton Ashcraft is making a push, and I think he's going to get a shot sooner than later here.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to have a third guy that can touch 100 and strike out guys like at a copious level. So long term, it's in good shape. There's a lot more coming. So the pitching staff should be a strength for a minute. That said, look how thin it got. Look how quick it got there this year. Because it felt for a minute like, yeah, they got plenty of room. They might not even need to call up Skenes, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, thank God they did. Thank God they had him. Thank God he was ready. Jones, I think, is starting to show a little bit of tire, and you're right, that 4 days rest, it showed up. It was different. It was a different pitcher. He didn't have a lot of the same stuff that he had. Plus, against the Dodgers, man, he was all in. Where do I think they can go this year? Where I always thought they could go. Around a 500 team. And I think if they're around that at the deadline, I think they'll add a little bit and probably make a push for a wild card. That's what I thought they would do. That's what I think they'll do. It's what I think they're on track to do.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think, especially, and we'll talk about it in the third part of today's show, you just look at the outlook of how things look right now. And a lot of these teams that they're competing with are teams that, one, they still play a good bit. Like this week, for instance, they're seeing the St. Louis Cardinals for the first time this year. They see the Cincinnati Reds for the first time this year next week. And then they play St. Louis again in 2 weeks and then again in a month. So they're seeing St. Louis a good bit over the next month and change. And they're going to see teams again like Milwaukee. They're going to see teams again like the New York Mets. They're going to see Arizona. A lot of these teams that people have seen in these graphics that we post about the wild card, they're going to see these teams. And with the starting pitching, especially bringing up Skenes, I agree 100%. In April, we were talking about where would you put them because the starting pitching staff was pitching very well. I mean, Gonzalez was looking pretty decent until he went on the injured list. Perez was looking like a very good pitcher and a very good offseason acquisition. He goes on the injured list, and then you're like, whoa, what's going on? Bailey Falter has been a surprise. And like you mentioned, you needed Skenes at that point. You really did. Because, folks, if he wasn't here, I don't know what to tell you about what the starting pitching staff would look like right now. And that's the thing that I think is also very interesting about analyzing this team through the first month is, one, they play very well when Skenes pitches. Let's just add that. I have seen the one loss the Pirates have had with Skenes on the mound in that Thursday San Francisco Giants game. But the run support that they get in those games is nuts. And you would like to see that kind of be more consistent, but I also think it's more of a coincidence that the offense just so happens to go off on those days. But like tomorrow, for instance, against the St. Louis Cardinals, I think that that's a fun little challenge for him. The Cardinals are a team that, to me, are just kind of up and down. And maybe he'll finally get to pitch a night game again, like he did last week. But you look at this team since he came up, and I think you're starting to see some of these pieces come together. And I wanted to go back to Nick Gonzalez for a second, Gary, and say this. Nick Gonzalez has become slowly this season the player that I think a lot of people expected him to be when they drafted him out of New Mexico State. That hit tool was considered the best in the draft, but he had his strikeout issues. And we've seen that throughout his career and his minor league career. He has been a resurgent player this year. I mean, it is a complete flip-flop of what we watched last season. And a lot of people, like what we're doing right now, talking about analyzing the team into 1 month of Skenes' career, Nick Gonzalez has to be at the top of that list when you're looking at guys that have helped contribute alongside Skenes in that call-up window.
He is, and he should also remind you on a daily basis why you shouldn't be calling for Henry Davis's head.
No.
These kids are kids. I mean, they really are in every sense of the word. Like they need to learn things and they need to improve. And Nick Gonzalez, shining star example of a guy that took a list of things that he was told to work on, worked his butt off on them, came back up here and applied them. I mean, he did exactly what he was supposed to do. He put his head down, he did the work, he got back up here, he took advantage of his opportunities. Now, it's not really a guess as to who the starting second baseman is. It's him until he's not. And to add to it, he's doing things in the field that people have been telling us he couldn't do for 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, he's fielding balls behind shortstop. He's diving out in the center field, making catches. Like, yeah, he's played really, really well. That should inspire everyone that just because, a guy doesn't make it like his first year, it does not mean that their journey is over necessarily. I mean, like, these prospects aren't dead just because they fall off some prospect list.
Yeah, and hey, yeah, let's talk about that with Termar Johnson too, falling out of Baseball America's Top 100. Just because that happened does not mean Termar Johnson is a bad baseball player and a bust. It does not mean that. Termar Johnson is still going to be the guy that if Nick Gonzalez keeps it up going into next season, Termar Johnson's still going to be the guy creeping around his shoulder. It's going and waiting to take that job away from him. That's just how it's going to be. Termar Johnson is that good, in my opinion.
I mean, I wouldn't say that's for sure, but I wouldn't predict that it's not either. That's the point.
No.
You
Yeah.
don't know. You don't
Yeah.
know. Jack Brannigan could make his way into having a case next year to make the team out of camp. You don't know. Just watch and let it happen. Quit trying to predict what everyone's going to be and just watch them become what they are. That's what you should do with young players.
Yeah. And Nick Gonzalez, especially, I mean, I had the pleasure of talking to him pretty much right after he was drafted. And you could even tell 2.5 years ago when I spoke to him that he was that kind of guy, like where you mentioned that he was given a list of things to figure out and fix, and he went and did it. And that's just who he is. And I mean, you could kind of get that sense even last year when he was struggling a lot. Then he was kind of saying, I know what I need to work on. I need to strike out less. I need to take the ball opposite field more. I need to do a lot of other things. And that's what I urge people to as well. Like you said, Henry Davis, yes, it is frustrating because of the state of the catcher position as it currently stands that Davis is not playing all that great, but he is eventually going to be the kind of guy, I think, due to his work ethic alone, that is going to be a good enough catcher back there. It's just going to take time. And I also go back to this example all the time, and I know it's not a position player. Folks, anytime you see a prospect or a young player struggling, remind yourself of Mitch Keller in the first couple years of his career. People wanted his head on a spike outside the Clemente wall for like 3 years straight because he was the worst pitcher in baseball statistically. Now he's on the verge potentially of being an all-star again.
And the big difference there is now the team's in a position where you can't afford to give that kind of time to a prospect. So it's not just fans being impatient, it's the team being in a different spot. They can't afford to have guys sit up here not doing anything for weeks. You got to come up here on fire and to a degree stay on fire.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen from Skenes. That's what we've seen from Jones. That's what we've seen from Gonzalez. And, there's a lot of good things going on right now. We've kind of flirted about talking about staying in contention throughout the year. Just how can the Pirates do that? We'll discuss in a minute. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Try the LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/lockedon, because LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a sales intelligence platform that helps professionals effectively prospect and engage high-value customers, drive higher revenue, and increase sales performance. It helps you target the right buyers, surface key signals, and you can find buyers that are most likely to convert. Fueled by LinkedIn's, I almost said locked ons, fueled by LinkedIn's 1 billion member platform, Sales Navigator gives you the most up-to-date first-party data, enabling you to unlock conversations with the people that matter. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/lockedon. That is linkedin.com/lockedon for a 60-day free trial, and let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/lockedon and get started. And welcome back, everybody, to the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where your Pittsburgh Pirates are 31-34, a half game out of the wild card and last place in the NL Central by about half a game. So things will change a little bit. So what's interesting is when you look at all this about where things stand right now, and I know standings watching in June can get a little weird, but usually post Memorial Day, you can kind of get an idea of where these teams are going to be, at least a little bit. Now, things can obviously change, like we saw the Cincinnati Reds last year be a well below 500 team and come back and almost sneak into a wild card. You've seen teams like the Arizona Diamondbacks who slide into that wild card spot, and that's all it takes for them to pretty much get to the big dance in the World Series. The Pirates right now, I think that their keys to being a contending team are there. They're in the ignition. They just have to be turned. I think that's kind of the term that I've said to myself. The keys are there. Like, you have things that you need. You have 3 top-end starters that are going to usually give you 6 innings at least of good baseball and quality starts. And if you're Mitch Keller, you're just going to go 5 innings no matter what, even if your hands tied behind your back, because I think he's had like 42 consecutive starts of 5 or more innings. If this offense can remain average, I'd say average, or even just below average, and the bullpen can continue to improve as we've seen over the last couple weeks, it's almost harder to say they'd be out of it than to say they'd be in it at that point, because of everything that's going on. And you hinted at it already about the Pirates being in a spot to potentially add. Now, when we say add, folks, that can mean a lot of things. Historically, it means just plug a little bit of holes and move on. It could mean something else in this trade deadline. But it's interesting when you break it down all now. I see people all the time say, Gary, oh, they need to go do this. They need to go do this. They need to do it now. Folks, the New York Mets are 28-36 in 3 games out of the wild card. Why would they start unloading stuff at this current moment when they're a sweep of a team could put them right back in a spot? There's realistically, I'd say, what, Gary, 4 or 5 teams that know they're not winning this year at this current moment?
I'd say there's 5 right now. There's about 6 that know they're in it, and 19 or so that are in the middle in purgatory. And I don't know, man. Like, I just think it's early to be worried about something like that. Like, let's say, like, in the month of June, Rowdy Tellez hits 10 home runs. You may not necessarily think there's an upgrade available at first base between him and Connor Joe. I'm kind of like there if Rowdy's at least that kind of decent. He's got that in his history. That's not even a stretch. You know, so if he hits for power, that's what he was brought in here for. Why would you now that you're getting it go, oh crap, we need to go get it? Like, you'd be happy with it, right? If O'Neal Cruz does even just a little more than what he's doing. Just even against right-handed pitching. Well, the offense is going to start carrying itself a lot better. If you get a surprise like the Arizona Diamondbacks did with Corbin Carroll, like say Henry Davis does figure it out. Something clicks. Somebody gets him on CBD treatment and he comes in calm tomorrow and he gets up to the plate and he just all of a sudden everything looks like it's clicking. He's hitting home runs and he's driving the ball all over the place and he's running around and he's catching and he's throwing guys out and everything looks great. That's the kind of shot in the arm a team like this gets that takes them from in it to like, look out, you don't want to play us. They're not that far away. They're either going to get it organically this month or they're going to go in the next month knowing they have to go get something.
And another player you didn't mention in there either, because I have been speaking to a lot of people about the need for left-handed power on this team. If you get it from Rowdy Tellez, great. Awesome. That is wonderful. Now imagine if Jack Sawinski could find a way to figure it out. I see everybody pinning they need to go get Luis Robert, and I love the guy. He's one of my favorite players in baseball. But let's say Jack Sawinski throughout this month or even early July has one of those crazy stretches where he hits 8 home runs in 2 weeks. Why would you go trade your entire top farm system for a guy?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, the White Sox are doing exactly what the Pirates did with Reynolds, which is basically like, here, we'll dangle him. Here's this insane price that nobody's going to pay. Let's just see if anybody's really stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to pay that for a guy that's been injured as often as he's been injured.
Nope.
That's just a fact. And it won't even be about the Pirates being cheap or being prospect huggers. It'll just be they're not that desperate for somebody that's going to come here and improve something if he stays healthy, but he hasn't. They've got problems like that already. Yeah. And I think if it was a lefty, maybe you'd have a conversation that probably goes a little bit further.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people said, why does the handedness matter? It matters, folks. The Pirates' left-handed hitting production is not great. And especially against righties, you can see the clear discrepancy with this team between righties and lefties. It's just, I mean, anytime they play a left-handed pitcher, I think they're winning the game. I'm just being flat out serious. Against left-handed pitching, they are phenomenal. The only problem is you're only seeing left-handed pitching maybe like once or twice every 2 weeks, if you're lucky, unless you're playing the Miami Marlins, of course, in the opening series of the season. But this is a team, folks, that I could sit here and tell you right now in June, this is a team that either way is going to be fun to watch down the stretch. This is a team that, yeah, I know a lot of people with Ben Cherington's comments where he was saying this is a better team. Let it play itself out. That's all you can do. We as fans, we as podcasters, we as whoever can only watch it happen as it happens. And that's what we should all do, because everything will fall into place the way it is supposed to, be it outside acquisitions, be it internal hot streaks like what we've seen from Rowdy Tellez as of late. I mean, the guy's hitting over 500 in the month of June. You take it and you run with it, much like with Bailey Falter. There's a lot going on with this team that's good. I would say there's a lot more good than bad going on with this team right now. That would be the one sentence that I would say about this team, Gary.
Yeah, I would say if you're tired of being patient, that's fine. That's your call. I'll see you when they get there. I understand how it looks, and I understand that, they've taken too long to do what you think should have been done a year earlier or whatever. But to me, this was kind of the blueprint they were following, which was we're going to develop most of this team internally. This is kind of the last year of that big push. And now you start to use the talent and you start to infuse more. And I think it's the first of many good years to come. So I guess I'm not going to get too sweaty about this one. I'm just going to enjoy it.
Yeah. And I will be right along the way here every Monday through Friday here on the Locked On Podcast Network and the Locked On Pirates podcast, covering everything Pittsburgh Pirates. On tomorrow's show, we'll have JD Haffron of Locked On Cardinals. You guys just love JD. Not as much as you love Stephen Offenbaker of Locked On Reds, who I'm sure we'll see in about a week and a half, because I had some recommendations and some requests as to what to say to Stephen for the first time in 2024. Gary, you'll have 5 thoughts at 5 today, 4 on Thursday. Anything else that people can expect from you this week?
I don't know. We'll see what the week leads us to, because if they don't make some roster moves here to begin the week, I'm gonna have some questions to start with.
Yeah, there's a certain gentleman that I named earlier that, I don't think they need to leave him in the spotlight anymore, and he's already kind of been put 6 feet under. They just haven't completely buried him yet. But we'll see what happens. We'll discuss all of that on tomorrow's show. Find the show on Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Hit the notification bell and subscribe so you know when the show is coming to you every Monday through Friday. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday, folks. We'll see you tomorrow. But until then, see you on the flip side.